I'm really starting to think and believe that out of all the genres of film, media, and television, of which I am fond of all of them, I'm starting to really think that horror might just be my favorite.
This isn't about ratings anymore.
No one's going anywhere.
How could you let it happen, Jack? How could you let it happen?
Please be warned, anyone with young children in the room. What you're about to see
You okay, Jack?
is profoundly disturbing and shocking.
You get out there, Mr. Midnight, and you knock him dead.
And today we have Late Night with the Devil. I had to say something about this one. I've been super excited for this ever since I first heard about it. Kind of when I reviewed When Evil Lurks, ones that are getting more of a cult following and are more along the lines of like Shudder originals. Again, for those of you that don't know, Shudder being basically the horror version of Netflix, like just a streaming service dedicated exclusively to horror, whether it be pre-existing IPs and properties, or in this case, their ever-growing catalog of TV series, movies, and Late Night with the Devil is now one of the newest ones. I guess call them kind of wide releases because they are getting some coverage in national theater chains and whatnot, hence how I was able to see this at a Regal cinema. I didn't have to go to like an art house cinema to go see it. Limited though they may be, they are getting small releases, but I think it's really when people hear about this online and check it out on streaming, of which this should be on streaming pretty soon. So Late Night with the Devil is basically one of those co-directorial projects by, I believe, a pair of brothers. At least they both have the same last name. So Cameron and Colin Cairns? Cairn? Now they both have experience in the industry. Carmen is a little bit greener around the ears. Been in like film and media for a little over a decade or so. Colin's been involved since I think the late 90s, the mid to late 90s. Usually, if they're doing films, they're typically co-directing and working together on them. They might be most known for a movie called 100 Bloody Acres. Ratings are fair, it seems, but it kind of has that vibe of like lower budget B horror thriller movie. I don't know. And now don't get me wrong, all the cast in this movie, I could sing their praises. This whole film, the premise of it being late 70s, one of those like talk show entertainment, late night show variety power hours with a whole cast of, the mainstays on the crew, as well as the guests that they bring in for the Halloween holiday special. But of course, we have our star performer. I've been singing this man's praises on my channel for a hot minute now. One of my favorite actors out there, and I love the diversity of roles that he's in, David Dastmalchian. David Dastmalchian, he's one of the main figureheads of the trailer for this film, and he's barely in it. Talk about him whenever there's a movie and he's in it. David Dastmalchian, I don't know what it is. He just has a certain reverence for art and for horror and cinema and geekdom in general. And normally this guy only seems to get like supporting roles or side character roles. Ever since The Dark Knight, really, whenever this guy takes on a role, fully embodies it, and it's just such a joy to see him on screen. He's wonderful, and he finally has his first starring role. And that's what all the news articles have gone with for this film, is not just to say, oh, this movie is great, but it's like David Dastmalchian finally has his first starring role, and it's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's an asterisk there at the end of that statement now, but we'll get to that shortly. I can't make any bold claims like, oh, I've been following this since its inception, since its production, but, when the first trailers dropped for it, obviously I saw those, and then I started digging into it, and then the algorithm started feeding me all the news updates and information about its release. But what's been carrying this film so far was its perfect Rotten Tomatoes score for the first 70 plus reviews that it received. Granted, last I checked, the cumulative score dropped to I think 96% overall, which still for horror is great. Normally a movie comes out, right? 14 or 20 official critic reviews, assuming they weren't paid for, come out, and the movie's at 100% or something like that. They'll say, oh, this movie currently 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and they'll run with it. But then, as more reviews come through, average score down, and then boom, that's the gist of it. So for the fact that this movie was able to basically take in its first 70 or 74 reviews that it received, and have enough positive impressions that it stayed at 100% for as long as it did, to me is an impressive feat in and of itself. So now I bet you're wondering what the hell this whole movie's about. Late 70s, late night talk show. It was acclaimed, but it wasn't the best, and now it's suffering, and it's make it or break it by a bit, like sweeps week, Nielsen ratings, like how are we gonna stick around? And so on the spooky Halloween night special, it's kind of like a desperate attempt at garnering audience and views and ratings and controversy. And so we're gonna bring in like, a fortune teller magician who can commune with the dead. We're gonna bring in a potentially possessed girl. We're gonna bring in the woman helping to be the conduit in that, and like a skeptic and all this. And so bring in all these polarizing figures, and then as the evening progresses, as this episode of late night television progresses, things are a little bit creepy, kind of a slow burn, but sometimes it builds to a crescendo here and there, and that's the movie. And by the trailer, you can pretty much make out that there's going to be some potential supernatural angle involved to all of this. I don't want to get too much into it, but that's the premise. I guess we're going right into the pros. I love the concept of it. I don't know what it is about the aesthetic and the vibe. Basically anything that's, 80s and 90s is fine, but something about the 70s backward, especially the 20s and 30s, having those aesthetics and time periods try to interact with something that's like supernatural or otherworldly, clashing of aesthetics and juxtaposition that I like watching, whether it's, like explorers in the late 20s trying to explore a tomb in Egypt or something, or the Nazis trying to get into the occult to win the war, and then you have like Hellboy, basically. It's a premise that, supernatural stuff happening in a found footage film and having the night go progressively worse and worse is admittedly nothing new for the world of horror and cinema, but to see it in this capacity, it's like the found footage of an episode of TV that clearly made headlines back in the day and now has been unearthed for general viewing, is just a cool premise that I like a lot. It's intriguing, it brings me in, and again, the aesthetic all comes together. As I alluded to earlier, the performances are all great. I can't sing Dastmalchian's praises enough, and all the cast of supporting characters, of which I don't recognize any of them, but they were all great. Everybody played the role and played it so well. The chemistry interwoven between the cast, everybody plays off of each other super well. I believed characters and character motivations. It was all great. Always a plus for me, practical effects. They were definitely used throughout this whenever possible. Now, granted, there are definitely some moments where digital trickery is involved. The effects in general, whenever it was practical, they made it so, whether through acting performances or through prosthetics on set, and whenever there was digital, it was so applied in a very complimentary way. So all the effects were great, and definitely horrific in moments. I know this film has also garnered a tiny bit of controversy. Like whenever they cut to commercial, there are these 70s themed Halloween, weird, kind of off-putting, warbly title cards, like just the "we'll be right back" or technical difficulties. From what I understand, those were created / generated by AI art. But also, from what I understand, this film, when it was in production, this wasn't made during the whole SAG-AFTRA, the AI scandal and all that. This wasn't made to replace artists, from what I understand. And if we're giving out benefit of the doubt, this was a tool that was used, it's not as a replacement, but as a tool where we had all the artists doing everything else to plug into this project of a film, and then for these title cards, they just use the tool to generate these weird, uncanny valley, six-finger hand type of deal, warbly, creepy, we'll be right back, interlude cards, basically. So I would always say support the artists, obviously. I don't think it was done with ill intent. My note says slow burn with well-executed crescendos, but I think it's only a slow burn in the sense of you're not just going to jump right into spooky, scary skeletons. It's a talk show, so you're going to start pretty normal, you're going to kind of have the late night variety hour, and then things get a little bit creepy and then rise up from there. I like that combination though, where things kind of go from just mildly unsettling to pretty creepy to downright horrific eventually. This is the trouble we run into, right? If a movie is trash, if a movie is poo-poo dog water, then of course I'll be the first one to rant about all of its fallacies and to spoil it and to tell you not to go see it and explain to you why it's bad and what all it does wrong. But when a movie is as good as this, then I'm on the opposite end of that fence, where I don't want to spoil anything. I want you to go in as blind as possible to this film. I saw the one trailer, and then whenever ads came up, I would scroll past them because I was like, no, I don't want to see any more. Go in as blind as possible, and you're going to be in for a great time, as I was. Literally, the only negative comment, the only negative note or thing I have to say about this film at all, period, is that, well, when it comes to basically the story, the overarching story, there's aspects of the story that I wish they kept certain plot elements like vague and open to interpretation. Could have been speculation, extrapolation, interpretation, perhaps even theory crafting. I still like the ending overall, and the film in itself I really enjoyed, but I think the only possible nitpick I could have done, and it's the only thing that keeps this film from being an absolutely perfect film in my eyes, is I wish that things would have been a bit more like, oh, here's what probably happened, we'll let you figure that out. I would have liked it if for once it was a bit more vague, but again, I'm not mad about it. Overall, it's only a small gripe and nitpick. Late Night with the Devil is definitely in my top 10 for the year so far. Biased, again, as always. Not only do I love Dastmalchian and whatever work he does in the industry, but I'm a big fan of horror. These Shudder originals are just getting like better and better. I hope that, smaller studios, of which this film had like 8 or 10 studio logos at the beginning, so I hope more films like this get made. It's just well made, it's well done, good performances, good spooks and scares, intriguing, interesting story. It's not too long. I think it's like an hour and a half, maybe. I really enjoyed it. I would love to see it again. I would say go into it, like I said, as blind as possible. Try to experience it. If you're not a fan of horror or supernatural horror, anything like that, then yeah, you can skip it, but I'll leave it at that. Late Night with the Devil, in my not so humble opinion, gets a low 5 out of 5. A low 5 out of 5, like I said, near perfect. Definitely one of the better ones to check out this year. I am working through a ever-growing backlog of film and film reviews that's going to take me a considerable amount of time to catch up on, but I had to prioritize movies like this whenever there's either an early access release or a really good film to talk about. Can't wait to see what Dastmalchian does next, now that he's garnered even more attention and support. But thank you guys and gals so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.